What makes us human? What is our evolutionary advantage as a species? How did we get here? It's our imaginations. It's our creative potential to actualize ideas into action, whether that's on our personal level or from a societal level. That's what we do as humans so well. And we need to do a lot of that right now because we're facing a time when we need more solutions than we've ever needed before. 7 billion people and rising in the world. We're looking at extreme environmental change and social inequity that just keeps getting further and further. We're looking at all sorts of violence and ideological conflict that comes as a result of facing an uncertain world. Now, all this is happening really, really fast, and the reality is, whether we like it or not, we can't go back in time. The train has left the station. Technology is exponentially increasing. We're looking at a future that is totally unknown with the rise of silicon-based intelligence into some said singularity. Whatever happens, we're looking at a completely different situation. We've become addicted to our technology. It's transforming who we are and how we relate to each other, how we relate to the earth. Species are becoming extinct on a mass scale in the skies, on land, and in the ocean. And this fear and this scarcity that we have in the culture, it's leading us into a space where people feel marginalized, people feel disempowered. That leads to terrorism. That terrorism leads to, even in first world democracies, a loss of our civil liberties. Is this the future that we want? No. Well, how do we do something about it? It's so easy in this world as one individual to feel like there's nothing that we can do in this uncertain world with infinite complexity. Even experts and politicians, even they don't know what to do. So what can we do? We can do the same thing that we've always done: experiment. And when I say experiment, I don't mean just a rifle shot here into some specific, siloed, institutionalized version of conformist experimentation. We need to take a shotgun approach. We have unlimited ammunition. We have a larger creative capacity as a species to come up with solutions now than at any point in history by far. But the thing is, this tipping point we're at in our new digital era, it's not just some historical cycle that we can passively wait for, that the Renaissance will come, the rebirth. We must instigate this Renaissance through action, collective action. And experimentation isn't anything new, but the context needs to be reimagined. Right here in Sweden, folkhemmet, the concept that came around that everybody's entitled to own a home, it can radically transform a society. New models like the kibbutz in Israel are very relevant to understand how can we create an experiment for community living self-sufficiently with all of our needs in a fundamentally different way. We need to encourage this kind of social experimentation on a governmental level and in terms of private investment. We need to do everything that we can to replicate as much of this social experimentation. We need to fail hard and we need to fail quick. The bottom line is, we spend so much of our energy trying to reform stuck institutions and models. And it can be demoralizing, and it can be hard, and much of it is not the right approach for us to be taking. As Buckminster Fuller says, reforming the system is not necessarily the best way to move things forward. We must create new models that become more relevant and therefore make the old models obsolete. Burning Man. Who of you have heard of it? Raise your hands. Who of you have been to it? Raise your hand. All right. So Burning Man began fundamentally as a social experiment. Let's reimagine civilization. Let's co-create a community. Over the last 28 years, Burning Man has grown into what it is today, a temporary city of 70,000 people who come together with no money and no trash cans to harness their creative potential, to experiment with their radical sense of self and identity. This isn't just about the experts coming together and showing off. This is about everybody participating in something fundamentally new, not only for them, but cumulatively for our society. And that experiential catharsis, going through that immersive experience, fundamentally transforms people because it makes possibility right into your hand. That dust that you feel on your skin is proof that the models that you may dream of can be manifested. And the power of learning how to manifest those comes down to experimentation. Burning Man as a model has been growing dramatically. It's happening in over 100 different places around the world, including one of my favorites here in Sweden. It's called the Borderland. And the Borderland has reinvented what Burning Man is fundamentally. So that's the thing. As we scale and replicate the models that we have, we must continue to reinvent them constantly. For as soon as we stop doing that, we lose them. If we rubber stamp our ideas, then they lose their magic, they lose their relevance. So we have to think about this concept, this idea of nouning, if you will. Experimentation is a living and breathing process. It's a verb. It lives there on the cutting edge inside of our hearts. It's something that we can never assume will be static. When an outcome, a fixed outcome of an experiment, turns into an identity, because we love it and we want to make more of it, and then that identity turns into an institution, then that institution turns into dogma. And that dogma is right back to where we started, stifling our creative potentials, creating a prescribed set of values and rules to limit us. We must not fall into these traps. And it's not just the isms that fall into those traps, capitalism, socialism, fascism. It's actually the countercultural identity itself. The hippie movement, the green movement, Occupy, even burners. It's so easy to fall into the trap of identifying so much with one solution that happened in the past that it becomes who we are and limits us. So what's different now? The internet. This is an umbilical cord. We are all connected. We are learning and adjusting and calibrating into this new macro organism that we now are. And it is definitely a time of some growing pains. But this new participatory identity and way of life is fundamentally different. The best practices and transparency that we have access to every day transform how we view the world, allocate our resources and time, who we feel we are in the context of others. And democracy even is transforming from the idea of voting to being constantly part of an evolving real-time conversation. Disintermediation is a product of the exponential technological change we are experiencing, removing the middle obstacle and creating a peer-to-peer society. That is the infrastructure we are now inhabiting. And we have to take these innovations that are happening in certain areas, and we have to spread them to the other areas. The public sectors of the world need to change, and they will. But they won't through just merely activism. They will through creating better systems and replicating those results. Virtual collaboration is fundamentally transforming how we are able to achieve outcomes. What was the phone and the fax machine is now virtual hangouts online and is becoming a whole new world of augmented and virtual reality. We don't even have the capacity to imagine what our collaborative potential will be in a mere decade. This is cause for great optimism, but the exponential acceleration of technology alone will not bring us to the promised land. We must develop the cultural and social technologies to properly leverage these moments we're going to have in our evolution to create the better world we want to see. Part of this means, how do we unlock our real genius as a society? Well, we need to support those with creative potential, which is all of us. But we especially need to support those who are not neurotypical. Those with gifted minds need to be nurtured by society. We have the capacity to create the society that will unlock our potentials, but we need to feel loved and we need to feel supported in the process of that cultivation. We also need a culture that isn't afraid of failure. Everybody fails. You cannot succeed without failure. That is just not true. In order for us to solve the biggest problems of our time, we need to fail a lot. We need to fail hard and quick and cheap, because failing now has become easier than ever, because the capacity to create and prototype is quick and it's cheap and it has radically democratized. Everyone in the world has the means to try and solve the biggest problems, and the majority will fail, and that is our collective learning. We have to break through the models that are preventing us from seeing risk. Nonprofit, for-profit, being very siloed in our ways, return on investment versus philanthropy. There's a new way forward. We have to invent those paradigms too. Cultural technology is key. Larry Page here, the founder of Google, has this quote where he essentially talks about things like Burning Man, which he's been going to for years, and the importance it has as a social laboratory for some of the implications of what technology is doing to our world. Is it enough to just develop the next new app, have exponential growth, and watch the world try to realize what's going on and adapt to it? Maybe not. Maybe we can take a fundamentally different approach to how we innovate as a species. We need to invest more in creating contexts for social innovation in our cities, in our classrooms, and in oblivion. Because this transformative experience is empowering. Being a co-creator in a societal experiment is fundamental to what it means to be civic in the 21st century. Only we as individuals can know what our destiny is, what we want to experiment with. And it is very important that we don't do things that can hurt others or ourselves in the process. There's been a lot of that's happened in the 20th century, and we need to learn the lessons of history. But I'll tell you what I think. I think we need to test the boundaries. We should start right here with our identities. Think you might be gay? Go try it. Are you an artist? Maybe you've never thought of yourself as one? Go make some art. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? We got to break our taboos. We got to break off our shackles. That's what it's going to take for us to move humanity forward, believe it or not. And from the identity, it comes up to the community. We don't just have to live in the city apartment because that's what everyone else is doing. My fiance, actually, who's here, Katiana, she grew up in an intentional community because 30 years ago, her parents and their 5 best friends decided to buy land together with a water source and create an integrated community. She never needed a babysitter. They only had to cook one night every 3 weeks. And I've never seen a richer community. These models are really important, and we need to continue to reinvent them. And we need some really wacky models too, like building a libertarian utopia on a barge floating in international waters. People talk about that kind of thing. And even if it's not your cup of tea, it's really important because it's those types of experiments that allow us to realize the possibilities of the variety in a huge diaspora of things that we can do to construct a different society. Well, hey, Swedish government. In so many ways, Sweden is a leader and a model for modern democracy. In so many ways, this country has blown my mind, and you as a people, and what your culture has been able to do to nourish and support itself through a modern identity. Let's take it a step further. What if the Swedish government was to take 1% of the budget and give it back to the citizens in the form of civic currency? And then the citizens had the power to invest that money into an internal crowdfunding network for civic projects. Not every public sector in the world has the capacity to pull off innovations like that, but maybe Sweden does. So, for all the other people living in other institutions that maybe are a little less supple, what about the people who hold wealth? Well, I challenge those who are professional investors or exited entrepreneurs or philanthropists to break your models. Take a portion of your portfolio and do something that is intentionally risky and bold. Listen a little less to the metrics in your head you use to evaluate almost everything else, and actually give your heart something to dig into, something that really excites and kind of scares you. We need some more risk like that in the world. And to Larry Page, the founder of Google, and others, technologists are in so many ways at the cutting edge of leading humanity in the direction of where we're going, whether we like it or not. So let's prioritize investing in things like Burning Man. We need to create more contexts, more social laboratories to understand and experiment with the implications of where we're going as a species. We must all be bold in playing our part in the future of humanity through experimenting in our own lives. So go out in the world and figure out who you are and where you want to be and what you want to go do. Because there are no spectators in the 21st century. Thank you.